Good afternoon. My name is Ed Kuiper, Systems Architect with Nutanix. Today I'm going to provide a demo of backing up virtual machines running on AHV on a Nutanix cluster to an S3 bucket up in AWS. From there, we will restore the virtual machines from the S3 bucket to a Nutanix cluster running on bare metal in AWS, and we call that solution Nutanix clusters. I'm excited to share this with you because I think this may be the first demo of us actually doing this, and it's a solution that I like to call disaster recovery on demand. What we're doing here is we're building out a Nutanix cluster in AWS, and we can then hibernate that cluster so that we're not paying for the utilization of the cluster, but we're paying for the storage only. Our production on-prem cluster will then back up normally, and then it'll also have an S3 target for archive. Or you can back up to S3 and on-prem at the same time. And we're going to use Haiku to demonstrate this. So the first thing I want to do here is log into Prism. And as I log into Prism, I'll drop down and I'm going to show you the VMs I have running first. You'll see that there are about 13 VMs right here, one of them being powered off. But I don't want to use these VMs for our tests because I want to show you some of the other benefits of Nutanix along the way, such as application provisioning or application deployment. I have a blueprint that I created for a LAMP stack, which will be made up of a load balancer, 2 application servers, and a database server. So what I'm going to do here is open up the blueprint, and I'm going to click Launch, and I'm going to give this blueprint a name. So today what we'll do is we'll call it Demo S3 Blueprint. And then I will prefix all of the virtual machines with that as well using a variable. And I'm going to go ahead and deploy that. So right now what's happening is we're using a blueprint to deploy 4 VMs. Now, as this kicks off, we'll be able to drill in and take a look and see what's really happening by choosing Audit and then dropping down, and you'll start to see that it's in the Create section here. And as that continues, we'll be able to take a look at all the scripting that's behind it. So as we're getting that started, let's log into AWS and create our bucket, right? Because we want to take these VMs that we're deploying and back them up into this S3 bucket. All right, so my bucket name, let me copy that from my other screen, bring that over here, and we're going to hit Create Bucket. It's just going to be today's date and AWS Demo-1, and that'll be in the US East region. And we'll keep all versions of an object in the same bucket and keep everything else default. All right, and we should have a bucket being created inside of AWS. What we'll do now is we'll go back into Prism Central, and you'll see that the blueprint has kicked off and it started to deploy those VMs. If I click on one of the VMs that's actually has a task running, I can click on that and you'll see I can pull out what's going on. You'll see the script that is currently running. If I go back to VMs, you'll notice that the 4 VMs that we're deploying have appeared, and I could go into them and I could launch console and you'd see that they're up and running. Okay, what we want to do now is go into Haiku, right? Because we have our VMs built. Haiku's already been deployed. So I will log into Haiku. And once I log into Haiku, there's a couple things I'm going to need to do. First, let's go to virtual machines. And we want to make sure that we refresh and we can see the new VMs in there. So Haiku is using our APIs. to populate this information. So everything Haiku is doing uses Nutanix APIs. So it's a very seamless operation. It's very integrated. The next thing I am going to want to do is assign a policy for these VMs. But before I do that, I'm going to want to create a policy, and I'm also going to want to create a target, right? Because the policy is going to ask, where do you want to back this up? So let's start with the target, and here's where we're going to add that S3 bucket. So just to keep everything standardized, we'll use the same naming convention. So this is an S3 bucket, right? And we'll say backup to S3 bucket. And we'll just standardize with 50 there. And for the type, we're going to choose AWS. And then for the bucket name, we'll keep that the same. And the access ID and the access key I created to this account earlier. So I'll just copy and paste that information in. Right, and we're going to save that. And we are creating that target. If I click on the jobs, you'll see that's creating right now. So we'll let that finish. As that's creating, if I come back to policies, you'll see we have some default policies of gold, silver, bronze. What I'm going to do for the sake of this is add a new policy. And for this policy, we'll just call it S3 bucket. And we'll just repeat that here for the description. And let's back up once a day. And our retention will be, let's just say 2 days. All right, so we're going to back up every day, recover within a day, and our retention every 2 days. And then the target will be that bucket that we created. All right, so that's that S3 bucket. And we're going to save that. All right, and you'll see that falls in line down below. Now we can go up to our virtual machines, and I can choose the VMs that were deployed through Calm, through automation, and I can apply them to the S3 bucket policy. And as soon as I do that, you'll see that they're going to start to back up. Now, when I created my target, I set it so that it can only back up one VM at a time. For my circumstance, that's fine because I have a lower bandwidth, but normally customers are going to choose 5 or maybe 10 VMs at a time to back up. So this might take some time. So while we're doing that, what we'll do is we'll come back over to Prism Central, and let's take a look at the automation process that was happening while we wait for those VMs to be backed up to that S3 bucket. So when we come into Calm and we launch the application that we deployed and we look at audit, you'll see it's still creating. The VMs are done, but it's still finishing up the scripting, the install process. And so if I open this up, you'll see that this is the output of what's going on this particular VM right now. And if I look at the script, here's the script that was applied when that VM was created. All right, so again, it's just finishing that up. And when this is done, we will have 2 application servers, a database server, and a load balancer. And the database server is running MySQL, and what we'll be able to do is launch what we call an application named Task Manager. And we do this for a lot of demos. While we're waiting on that, let's just jump over to AWS and let's drill into that bucket we created. You'll see that there's some folders being created. And this is the metadata and the backup of our VMs, virtual machines, to that S3 bucket in AWS using Haiku. So we're on schedule here to be able to get those backed up and restore. You'll see that we're still backing up 1 right now. We've got the other 3 pending. So while we're waiting, let's do something else. This application that's being deployed is a 3-tier application. So let's set up some security policies around it, some micro-segmentation policies. And I'm walking through this really just to show you the simplicity of Nutanix. You'll notice that we're never leaving Prism. Everything that we need to do is in this central pane of glass. And that is truly valuable for our customers. And you'll notice that within this 30-minute demonstration, not only are we going to have created VMs using an automation solution, but we are now backing them up to S3. We're going to restore them to another cluster, and we're going to do some microsite configuration. So all of that within 30 minutes it's a pretty powerful story. So I'll drop down to security policies, and you can see I have a policy here. I'm going to go ahead and delete that policy so that we can start fresh. All right, so that policy is now deleted. So we will go into our VM list, and we have our load balancer, database server, and 2 application servers. What we want to do first is, number one, create an application because we want to create a policy for this application. So we're going to create a category that will reference it later. So this category, it's going to be an app tier, or sorry, an app type. So if we come into app type, let's see, the app type we'll use here is Task Manager. So that's the application. And if I come back in here, let's uncheck these 3, and now we are going to manage categories on the load balancer. And this is going to be an app tier, and we'll call this, actually, let me do that again, tier. And this will be the load balancer. We'll add that in. And then we've got the 2 web servers. We're going to put those in the application tier, and we'll just do those one at a time. Just click in here. Manage categories. So tier. So web tier. And we'll do that for the other one as well. Let's just jump out of here. And we'll do that for here. All right, manage categories. Tier. Web. Add that. And then the last one we'll do is the database tier. And then I'll be able to show you where we're going to assign these categories. But you'll notice how simple it is just to navigate around Prism. And really what we did is we took the load balancer and made it part of the Taskman application category, and then we made it part of the load balancer application tier category. And we did that, same type of thing for the SQL and the 2 application servers. Now, if we drop down to our security policies, we can now create a security policy, and you'll see we have the option to do an app policy, an isolation policy, really just prod versus DR, or a VDI specific policy or end user computing policy. So we're going to choose an app policy since this is a LAMP stack, and let's just do a demo. We'll call it AWS 1, and we'll just copy that in and save microseg. And really, we're just doing this to waste time while we're waiting for those backups to finish. So for the application, we're just going to choose Task Manager, and we're going to hit Next. And now you'll see we have the option to secure our application. One thing we'll do is we're going to secure an entire application tier. So I'm going to add all 3 tiers, the load balancer, the web server or the application server, and then the database server. And then I am then going to set the rules within the application. So I'm going to say the Task Manager Load Balancer can only speak to the application servers on port 80. And then the web server can only speak to or talk to the database server on port 3306, which is the MySQL port. All right, and then we're not going to allow the database server to flow outside of that port either. Now we'll switch over to the inbound outbound. For the outbound, we're going to change this to a whitelist, and the only communication I'm going to allow for this test is we'll just say DNS. So 192.168.86.40 is my Active Directory controller. So I'll type that IP in, and I'm going to say to the database server, UDP port 53, and hit save. And then incoming wise, I'm going to give it a category, and I'm just going to say anything tagged as production. Right. So because I know this is all my production workloads are Nutanix, I'll just add all the VMs that I want to speak to the load balancer and port 80 to that category. And I'll save that. If I want to do any additional automation, I'll also want to add Prism, what I'm in, to also be able to communicate to each one of these servers on port 22. But for the sake of this demo, and just because we're just wasting time till the backups are complete, we'll skip forward. And I'll hit next, and we're going to save and monitor. Once I save and monitor, I can come back into that policy, and you'll see that I don't have any traffic flows just yet, but let's close out of here and let's generate some traffic. So first, let's go back to the Calm blueprint that we deployed, and let's see if it's finished yet. And it has. It's completely finished. There's no errors. So now I can come back to VMs, and if I look at those 3 VMs, I'm going to go into that HA proxy, which is the load balancer, and let's copy that IP address out, and let's browse to it. Right, and we get our application. So this is a load balancer that's load balanced between 2 application servers, and the task manager database is MySQL. And we'll just add a test and a test 2, right? And we've generated some traffic. So now what we can do is switch back over to Prism Central and go under security policies, and we should be able to see some traffic flow, which we do. And you'll see here is my discover traffic. Now, because I'm monitoring, I have not blocked access, right? If I go ahead and apply this policy, you'll notice that if I come back over to this application, it's going to time out. You'll see waiting, 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 and it will time out. And we'll come back to that to show you, but for now, you'll see that is now being blocked because we applied the policy. So the nice thing about Flow or our microseg piece is that you can monitor without any disruption. You can then take a look and decide whether you want traffic to be allowed or not, and then you can apply the policy. And you'll see that still spinning there. But if I come in here and I update, because I realize that I want that traffic to flow, I can simply click on that traffic flow and apply and accept it and hit OK. And I'll hit next, and then I'll apply that again. And if I come back in, you'll see I should be able to get into that application now. You'll see now it's actually allowing me in, and I can do test 3. And now I'm able to add that task in. And if I come back here and we close out and we go back in, we'll see that we're allowing that traffic now. All right, well, that was just a sidetrack just to wait to see if everything backed up. We are still backing up, but you'll notice that we do have 2 VMs that are already up there in that S3 bucket. So what we can do is move forward from here while we're waiting on the other 2. What we'll do first is go into the cluster that lives in AWS. I've already had that deployed. In a normal environment, we'd have it deployed and then hibernated and just waiting until you needed it. If I come under VMs, you'll notice that I have 2 VMs. I have my Haiku VM, which is pre-configured and ready to go. And then I have a test VM. So let's log into Haiku. And as I log into Haiku, you'll see pre-configured, meaning that it is up and running, but I don't have any policies applied. In fact, I don't have any policies besides the default, and I do not have a target. So let's create the target. What we're going to do here is import a target, right? And that target is going to be from AWS, and we're going to give it that same bucket name, right? Because it's going to go look at AWS and say, what bucket do you want to import? So I'm going to choose that bucket name. And then I'm going to copy the access key ID. and I'm going to copy the secret address key or secret access key. And we're going to hit next. And you should see that import successfully. Great. And then what's happening is it's asking you a backup controller to import, right? And because we only did the one, we only kicked off that one, that's all we have here. So I'll select it and I can hit next. And then it's going to ask again for that secret access key, which I will paste back in. And I'm going to choose import. And as I do that, you'll see I'm importing the target. That easy. Now, as that imports, what it's doing is it's going to populate the virtual machines that were backed up to the S3 bucket inside of Haiku in the Nutanix or on the Nutanix cluster that's in AWS. And then I'll be able to restore the VMs. So let's take a look at that job that's running. You'll see it's at 61%. We'll wait a couple minutes. There we go. It's finished. So let's go back up to virtual machines. And now you'll see 2 VMs. Now, those 2 VMs are the VMs that were finished backing up over here, right? So HA proxy and MySQL. The other 2 are still backing up. So we're just kind of skipping ahead a little bit for the sake of time. But if I take the HA proxy, I can select it, and then I can choose Restore VM. When I choose Restore VM, I can then clone it onto this cluster that lives in AWS. And it's going to allow me to choose which network I want to tie this VM to. So I only have one network sitting out here in AWS, so I'll choose that. And I'm going to choose Restore. And once I choose Restore, if I go into Jobs, you'll see that'll start to kick off. And that'll take some time. So it's pulling it from the AWS S3 bucket into this bare metal instance using Haiku. Again, Haiku taking advantage of all of the Nutanix APIs. So a very integrated solution. Now, while that's pulling in, you'll see it's actually going to move fairly quick. There, it's done. So let's just skip ahead here and let's go over to Prism. In AWS, you'll see there is that load balancer. And I can come in here and I can power it on. And we'll let that power up. So again, by simply coming into Haiku, the Haiku instance that we imported the metadata from the S3 bucket into, let's choose the MySQL VM now, and we're going to restore. Clone that VM. We'll choose the network. Save that. Hit restore, and we'll let that restore. Now, while that's restoring, I want to go back to my Prism instance or the VMs that we originally created because I don't want them running over here as well. So I do want to clean it up. And I just thought it would be really neat to show you how easy it is to clean up when you're using Nutanix. So I deployed 4 VMs in my production cluster, and now I want to get rid of them. I can simply go into the blueprint that I deployed. It's now considered an application. I can go to Manage, and I can choose Delete. And when I do that, it's going to go through and it's going to delete any VM that was created from this blueprint. So it's a really nice way to keep your environment clean so that if you deploy an application together, you can delete that application together. Or you can stop all of the VMs together or restart all the VMs together. So if I come down into VMs, you'll see that these 4 VMs will disappear shortly. All right, so let's go back over to our disaster recovery site where we were restoring, and let's turn on that MySQL and power that on. So now what we've done is we've restored the VMs that were over here into AWS. And if I choose the home screen here, you'll see that this cluster is running in AWS. It's a single node. If I go into Haiku, that's running on this instance, you'll see now if I refresh these virtual machines, you'll see the two clones that now I can apply those to their own policies to start backing up and replicating out for when I'm ready to fail back over. So that was a demo of Nutanix and Haiku together using AHV, backing virtual machines up to an S3 bucket, and then restoring those virtual machines onto bare metal in AWS running Nutanix. So I hope you found this valuable. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. My email is edward@nutanix.com. I have a blog, nutanixed.com. Feel free to check it out. And I look forward to hearing from you. Have a great day.